Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Historical Humans podcast. And on today's episode, we are going to be diving into Mexico and Mexican culture. But before we do that, my name's Justin Woods, and I'm joined today by my fellow co-host, Colum Coleman. Unfortunately, we did have to sacrifice Aaron to make this episode, but we hope we're able to make it up to you with the content of it.
Yes, Poochly La Poochly blows bright today in honor of that sacrifice. I do hope we did it right. We just kind of took some little foldable ladders out and
Just kind of pushed him off the
sacrificed
edge.
in the back of a parking lot, so I hope that counts.
But
But yeah,
we are talking about the Aztecs. If you didn't pick that up, I know I mentioned
today,
Mexico, but
today we are going to talk about the bloodiest religion in history. And for once, it's not Christianity. Yay!
oh no! All right, put
It's
your
the
Bibles and
Az-
pitchforks down today.
Yeah, it's the Aztecs. Uh, and oh boy, they are an interesting bunch when it comes to their religion. Probably to start us off, we're going to do a little bit of who they are and a few technical terms for what the Aztec religion actually is before we get into all the fun of the blood and guts and fancy myths.
Yay!
So yeah, this is the homework time, people. Don't worry, we'll get it over right and quick. So the Aztecs are a people that ruled central and southern Mexico during the 15th and 16th centuries. They were predominantly based out of the city of
Tenochtitlan.
Tenochtitlan, yeah,
Tenochtitlan.
Tenochtitlan, which is now Mexico City, which is that's how important their administrative center was to running Mexico, that it remained the administrative center up through the Spanish and into the era of independence.
It did change a little bit though, because Tenochtitlan was originally a canal floating city, and then
Yeah,
the Spanish came in and just started filling in the lake because they were based on Lake Texcoco. Texcoco, I believe is the name of it. But it was a massive lake that the city is now built on, and it's caused a lot of issues in modern day Mexico of sinkholes appearing, and just because they're built on a giant lake and effectively swamp.
yep,
But
yeah,
it's a really cool location in the heart of a valley, and when you look at it from a geographic perspective, it's in a great location because it's surrounded in basically two mountain valleys and
yep,
gives you protective, defensible positioning. And also, the water was huge, their agriculture, and there were a lot of natural resources nearby. In particular, and Cullum, I don't know if you knew this, but there's a very specific type of obsidian that is found there, and it
yeah,
is
yeah,
green.
yeah. The green obsidian. Yep. Yeah. So basically, from the Aztec perspective, this was a floating fortress that they could farm that had a natural stockpile of their main source of weaponry, obsidian.
And
So to
trade.
them, to a very much warrior culture, this is the dream. This is as if the city of Rome was founded on a giant iron deposit.
One of the funniest parts about it though is they would use these obsidians and they'd make these spiked clubs that would have like an inch or two of obsidian every couple of inches, and it was basically a mace. And when the Spaniards came, they weren't dressed in iron armor. They weren't dressed in chainmail. No, they were dressed in cotton garb. And obsidian is the sharpest material on Earth, to the
Yeah,
point where even in modern day with modern manufacturing, we cannot make an item sharper than obsidian.
yeah, yeah. The Aztecs also had a very fun trick because the Aztec warrior had that club and a shield. So you don't swing for the upper body. You take their feet off. So the Aztecs would just go for people's ankles, and the Spanish had no idea what the hell to do with this because the Spanish were people that were, their warfare was, fire a bolt or a bullet into center of mass. They went for the chest, the Spanish. So they were confused as hell. And then suddenly there's a bunch of Spanish people with one leg.
The,
But
the the sad and funny part about the whole conquest of the Aztec is one of the reasons why the Spanish even knew who they were and were able to eventually defeat them is as they landed on the shore and they started moving inland, they started talking to a bunch of the other smaller tribes, and every single one of the smaller tribes were like, "Oh yeah, assholes live up that way. Oh yeah,
yeah,
there's horrible people up that way. Oh yeah, the mean people are up that way." And
yeah,
as they got on, they found more and more people
yeah,
that did not like the Aztecs because of how brutal they were.
yeah. Basically, people who were outside Texcoco and its surrounding valley system hated the Aztecs because they were the people the Aztecs went to war with, enslaved, and brutally sacrificed. And speaking of brutally sacrificing, since Aztec territory contains so many other tribes in it, it's the Aztec religion did a little a bit of a funny thing here. See, it's what's called a syncretic religion, or sorry, yeah, syncretistic. And what syncretistic means is you decided to build your religion by taking the parts you liked out of other people's religions and passing the final completed work off as your own.
It's also a good tool for subjugation as well,
Yeah.
because as you grow as an empire and you grow as a population, the more elements that people can relate back to and can kind of
Yeah.
hold on to is actually a great
Yeah.
thing moving forward. And it's one of the reasons why they gained so much power and had such a good chokehold over everything.
Yeah. And one of the funny things about the Aztec religion is, in my opinion, it shows how focused the Aztecs were on their shall we say, empire, because they are heavily culturally influenced by two major powers, one to the south and one to the north, in terms of their religious beliefs. The Mayans in the south the Aztecs base their calendar off the Mayans because the Mayans were so good at it. And some of the original Aztec cosmology has a shall we say shared base with the Navajo.
It's
There's a yeah,
kind of interesting because you can almost see a manifestation of that cultural interchange just
yeah,
looking on trade goods, because within archaeology as a subject matter and as a discipline, there seems to be a disconnect between the Mesoamericans, which is what this would be considered, and the American archaeologists and beliefs. And we know that people lived contemporaneously, we just didn't know what their interactions were or their exchange. And we come to find out that the Navajo and the Puebloans and even the Anasazi to some degree would have these cultural interchanges and exchanges with the people of the Aztecs and other Mesoamerican societies. One of the reasons we are able to tell that is we found a lot of Navajo pottery and a lot of southeastern or southwestern American pottery in Mesoamerica, but then we also found that green obsidian. So you
yeah,
could see that there's stuff going both ways trade wise, and
yeah,
with trade you also get the exchange of ideals and beliefs, and that's where you see that cultural interchange. It's very fascinating.
yeah. And the Aztecs loved things other people had, especially if they could use it to scare the shit out of you.
Oh my god, if you've ever heard the Aztec death whistle, it is terrifying.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's designed to imitate a near inhuman shriek, and it's also designed to be pitched at such a way that it will echo off of mountains and valleys and ravines, making it sound a lot louder and a lot shall we say uh lot more everywhere than
Yeah,
it actually is.
it's more
It's
encompassing and more engulfing. It
encompassing.
surrounds you.
Yeah,
It
that's the word.
surrounds you and it reverberates. So it sounds like there's many
Yeah.
more than actually are around you, and it's a shrill sound.
Yeah, it is not fun. it's not fun for the guy blowing it either, because even though he knows what he's doing, it is not a nice sound to experience.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but maybe it's like a good whistle. Like it's more fun when you're not the one doing it.
yeah, yeah. Speaking of the Aztec things, how do the Aztecs view the world? We're going to talk about their cosmology because that's going to be the foundation of all these mythological things that come up later: the gods, the rituals, the human sacrifice, the various myths of origin and sustenance, and all the good things that we get to play with later. It's all going to be based on this cosmology. And for the Aztecs, the world was an incredibly dangerous, fatalistic place. The Earth we live on is the latest incarnation of a series of worlds, each of which was the gods' imperfect, failed attempt to create existence.
At,
The
at
Earth,
least it shows some level of trial and error too, though,
yeah,
because
yeah,
most other religions and beliefs, it's like and poof, perfection
yeah,
exists.
yeah. The primary issue at the core of Aztec beliefs is that the different gods all wanted to be chief god, except several of them are very much not suited to be the chief god. And so when they created their worlds, they got things wrong. Like the god of rain floods his eternally,
I mean,
forever.
when you can't turn the water off, that's just gonna keep pouring and pouring and pouring.
Yeah. The god of the earth turns the sun into a giant rock, and everything freezes to death.
Oh no.
Things like that keep happening until you get to our world, which is in its own tenuous state. But what's interesting here is that you get to see the syncretism of the Aztec religion. You get to see how it's cobbled together from different belief systems, because there's actually two versions of the Aztec belief system for how many worlds there been and how each one died. In the first version, it's very close to the Navajo version, where this is there are four Earths, which is the same as the Navajo belief, and you know the syncretic religion getting to argue with itself is hilarious here, because the in this version, which I was able to get a little bit more details on it than in some of the other ones, the first Earth had a sun made of water before a water god made that world, and the world flooded and drowned itself. So the second Earth came along and said, we need to not, we need to have more land, right? We got to have land. So they made the sun out of stone. This went as well as you could expect, because, being made of ground, the sun had an earthquake and detonated the cosmos.
Yikes! Oops.
The third Earth is where things get really interesting. It had a sun made out of wind, so just a giant hurricane in the sky. This Earth pissed people off so much that instead of the hurricane destroying it, a giant came along and just smashed everything to force everyone to move.
God damn it! Turn off this blasted wind.
Yeah. You don't need to blow your leaves at 6 in the morning, Carl.
No.
You don't need a leaf blower.
Carl, no. That kills people. Yeah.
The fourth Earth in this version is the current Earth. It has the sun of fire. The sun is made of fire, guys. We have light and warmth and things. It's finally starting to work.
Yeah, until it either engulfs us or explodes.
Yeah. And that is how the world is prophesied to end in this version. One day, the sun will detonate into a supernova and kill us all.
They're not really wrong there. Their
Yeah,
cosmetology's on point.
no. The science actually backs this up. Um, the downside is the Aztec reasoning for why the sun would explode would be because humanity forgot to feed it.
Well, yeah, it needs to be satiated with blood and sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be the human sacrifice we get into. Fun fact, everything the Aztecs do is to keep the literal sky from destroying the world.
I'm curious, like, what caused them to have this belief. I wonder if it was just a really bad sun flare or if it was some um, eclipse that happened that they got really terrified about.
I don't know. Things get pretty weird here. The Aztec gods are kind of like the Egyptian gods a little bit in the sense that like they are not human. Um, where like the Egyptian gods were kind of human, kind of animal, the Aztec gods are pure bestial monsters. They are the things nightmares come from. So, there's a lot of basically the Aztecs going around taking the darkest possible interpretation of everything. It's really messed up like that, but we'll get some more on that later. Just like the good guy is a giant man-eating serpent with wings. That's the good guy.
Quetzalcoatl. We love
Yeah,
Quetzalcoatl.
yeah. That's one of the good guys here. But yeah, there's a second version here that's a little more uniquely Aztec. And I was able to find a little less on this version, but it is uniquely horrible. In this version, we're on the fifth and final version of the world. There is nothing after this. And the first world was destroyed by what is only described as a jaguar rain, which is, as far as I can tell, was just a day and night downpour of giant murder cats.
Have you never heard the term "it's raining cats and dogs"?
It didn't rain the dogs, which, by the way, seemed to have been somehow impervious to the impact of falling from the sky, and instead immediately leapt upon and tore apart all other life.
Well, one, didn't you know cats don't take fall damage?
Apparently not. Even from orbit. Yeah. The second Earth was torn apart by storms and hurricanes. A giant, like El Nino cyclone just flew over the Earth and consumed it.
I was gonna say, like, we talked about this a little bit off camera, but for a group that prophesizes doomsday, it's almost like they built it in a seismically active volcanic zone that's impervious to being hit by hurricanes.
These are a harsh, brutal people living in a harsh, brutal place who marched across a massive freaking desert, saw this lake in this little tiny hellscape, and said,
That'll do.
It. There's nowhere else left to live.
It's not that bad. It's very beautiful. The jungles and forests are very plentiful, very fruitful.
Yeah.
The weather's not bad. It's pretty nice.
We're going to die here, guys. Earth number 3 is just consumed in fire. It just burns to the ground. I'm not entirely sure how this happens. I don't know if even the Aztecs knew. Just massive inferno. Literally what you think of when you think of hell. Just endless plain of fire.
Like the meteor that struck on the Yucatan.
Yep. Earth number 4 is the water Earth. This one gets drowned because the rain god cannot let it stop raining for even a day. Man had problems. And fun fact, despite causing the apocalypse in both versions of the Aztec cosmology, Tlaloc the rain god is one of the good guys. He mostly likes humans, which makes him in like the 5% of the Aztec mythos that doesn't want humanity dead.
You know, I'm starting to see why a lot of Mexicans do follow the Catholic belief, because the idea that most of the gods hate you and want nothing to do with you.
Yeah,
There's some
yeah,
certain parallels there.
yeah, yeah. Good for passive aggressive judgment. But and in this version, the fifth Earth is the current one, and it will not be destroyed by a supernova. Instead, the sun will run out of energy, tire out, and blink out of existence. At which point, the night sky and all the stars and moon will be free to turn and descend and devour the earth,
So
for they are
literally
kept at bay by the light of the sun.
would become a black hole.
Yeah, this one is death by black hole.
Astronomically, like they're not far off from what is eventually going to happen. I mean, our sun will go supernova, it will destroy Earth, and at some point in the future, a black hole will devour our world.
Yeah. Yeah, the Aztecs were smart in not attempting to provide a timeline for these things because, longer than human existence has ever been is, kind of a stretch.
They predicted the inevitable heat death of the universe.
But don't worry. If you're dead, you don't have to worry about that. In fact, you don't even have to worry about being dead. Because for the Aztecs, when you died, things were really weird. To start with, there are 13 heavens and 9 underworlds. The heavens are up in the sky and the cosmos above, and the underworlds live under the ground. And they're kind of like nation states, the same way that the Aztec and the Maya were. They're these little countries that live under the earth, little subterranean people, like we're in H.G. Wells' time machine or whatever.
Gotta go down to the eighth ring of hell. Be right back.
Yeah. And your afterlife had no moral judgments. You could do whatever you want. You could live your life whatever way you wanted to, and it did not determine where your soul ended up. What determined where your soul ended up was which god killed you. Who gets credit for your murder? And, real emphasis here on, so, how did you die? It's, yeah, it's pretty interesting there. And honestly, the best way to die would be to drown. Drowning would be considered the best way to die, at least from our perspective looking in. Because if you are drowned or killed by a storm, struck by lightning, you have lung disease or even leprosy, if that is what kills you, you get to go to Talak's land, the realm of the rain god, which is a perpetual, lush Garden of Eden. And that is where the good news stops.
Oh no.
for how you die. Because everyone else gets something pretty miserable. To start off with, there were 2 groups called the Huateca and the Sehuateteo. These people get to join the sun on its sort of path across the sky every day. And this was a high honor, but you had to die pretty horribly to get it. Because the Huateca were warriors who died in battle, people who were sacrificed to the sun, all the human sacrifices, and merchants who died in foreign lands. The Sehuateteo are all the women who died in childbirth, which it has been argued is the single most painful thing a human being can experience.
Yeah.
So you die in literal agony, you get to go join the flying ball of fire in the sky. Yay! But most people end up with end up going to Mictlan, which is ruled by Mictlantecutli, which is the skeleton god. And as you can imagine, from a god that is made of literal skeletons, he is not a nice person. And his underworld sucks.
Oof.
But the good news is simple. Fun fact: Mictlan was located in the desert to the north of the Aztec territory. So where the Navajo are.
The Chihuahua and Sonoran deserts. Yikes.
Yeah, yeah, the Chihuahua and the yep, there you go. That's a little more accurate. Yeah, you're probably right about that. Better geography right there. But yeah, yeah, it's under that desert. Uh, it's pretty miserable. It's dark. It's just generally unpleasant. But there is some good news. You only have to live there for 4 years. And on these 4 years, you would take a journey through all the 9 underworlds that are ruled, that comprise Mictlan. And at the end of it, your entire being would be erased from existence.
Damn.
And this was a good thing, because being in Mictlan is pretty miserable. And this was sort of the Aztec grieving process. After 4 years, there is no longer a connection between the living and the dead. You would honor your ancestors, annually until the 4th year. And then you were expected to move on with your life. There are living people that need things. There are concerns for the world that is still around you that need addressing.
I mean,
You were expected to move on. It's this way of cutting off
it's a double
spiritually.
edged, like, it's an interesting thought process for sure, because on one hand, you're letting go of the grief. You're giving yourself 4 years to grieve for the person and to try and get over the loss. However, after 4 years, to just say, okay, now there's no more connection on Earth,
Yeah,
I'm done. That's kind of fucked. Like, you would. I know a
yeah,
lot of people want to be remembered after they die. Maybe not so much having people grieve for them, but yikes.
yeah. And I think part of that too is just the Aztecs took ritual and sacrifice very seriously, and so having a cutoff point for when the dead can no longer commune with you is crucial. This is leaving the tequila on the grave. After 4 years, your dead friend can no longer come back for that tequila. So stop putting it there. It's this weird thing, and it's designed to help the Aztecs move forward, and it also shows just a little bit of the callousness and what's the word? How ephemeral everything was for the Aztecs. The world, life, death, everything is just in passing from one day to the next.
There's something kind of poetic about that, though, of, like, every moment is fleeting. You got to try and make the most of it, even in
Yeah.
death. Like, you enjoy the
Oh yeah.
moments that you can,
And,
and you move on.
and you damn straight better be making the most of it, because your purpose, by virtue of being a human being on Earth, is to preserve the status quo of the gods at any and all cost. Because the gods and their status quo is the only thing that keeps the world from being destroyed. And seeing as how humanity lives on the world, we'd kind of all like to not die in some sort of mass extinction event.
Usually, yeah. Most people would tend to prefer not to.
Yeah. So the only thing that really matters from a religious perspective is maintaining the rituals, sacrifices, dictated by the Aztec calendar, which we mentioned earlier is kind of a ripoff of the Mayan one. I think the Aztecs do things just slightly differently,
But
but
it's
it
in
is
the same
it's
Baktun cycle, and it still follows the same cyclical manner,
yeah,
in
it's
which
oh yeah, it's the same cycle thing. I think it's what, a 52-year cycle instead of what the Mayan one was on.
they still follow the same circular nature. And the biggest frustration is a lot of people say that
Yeah.
the Mayan calendar ended in 2012, but it was just the end of that Baktun cycle, and the
Hmm.
calendar literally just flips right back over.
Yeah. The what is it? Mayan one was more complicated. The Aztec one has two rings forming a single 52-year Baktun cycle. The Mayan one had a third ring that extrapolated that out to, exponentially larger.
I think it's like when you break it down, somewhere in the realm of about 5,000 years.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what the third ring added to it was, takes about 5,000 years to get back to it. But the Aztecs just had the two rings. So, it was effectively one calendar was little over one lifetime.
Yeah, so the Aztec calendar has 216 days, which is 13 months of 20 days, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's very interesting. And one of the cool things is you keep tying it back to the Mayan, but it actually does tie back just a little bit further to the Olmecs, and the Olmecs are very interesting because what they're known for is carving really massive heads.
Yep. Oh yeah, no, like the Aztec, that's a good point. The Aztecs also took from predecessors in their area, the Olmecs and the Toltecs, which is where you get a lot of other things coming out of this mythos.
Well, fun fact, they would take the Olmec heads, carve them down, and turn them into thrones,
Yep.
seats upon their predecessors, and then the Aztecs would also destroy the thrones when their predecessor died, the leader of the Aztecs.
Yep. Yeah.
Again, very
Aztecs seem to
symbolic. I'm not going to
repurpose
sit.
things very destructively.
It's just also kind of interesting, too, because it's like, again, with that moving on, with that
Yeah.
processing, you don't sit on the same throne someone else does. You sit on a new throne because you are a new person. You are setting a new dynasty, a new history, yada, yada,
Yeah.
yada.
Imagine if Game of Thrones they had to rip out the Iron Throne and then melt down the swords of all their enemies every time someone new sat on it. God, the amount of stuff that would go on.
I
But yeah,
mean, to be fair, that's their culture, though. That's their belief,
yeah,
and to a degree, I kind of understand it.
yeah,
My inner historian is like, but the history, the culture, it
yeah.
belongs in a museum.
No, Indy, it belongs here with these people who appear to be actively worshiping it.
Ah, worship, worship.
Yeah, and so with that, let's meet some of the players. There's a pretty big pantheon, but I believe we've got 8 here that are going to be the sort of gods with names that we're going to get into for some of the myths later, and also who are going to kind of form our core of, shall we say, cosmological balance and disturbance.
Just also fair warning: we don't speak Aztec. We're not very well vote. We're talking on this, but we don't have the pronunciation on
Yep.
par. I try to correct some pronunciation that I'm aware of, but it's gonna be
Yep.
butchered. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is going to happen. Like we're trying our best here. First up, first up in our lineup here, leadoff man is going to be none other than Mictlan Tecutli, the skeleton god of death and the underworld of Mictlan. He gets robbed later. Second up, coming in here is the headliner everyone loves to see, uh, Hutzli Zopachtli, the god of war. Um,
Huitzilopochtli.
he's a one he's our wonderful god. He's gonna be the headliner for a lot of things. Uh, in the third slot here, we have Tona Tua, the god of the sun. This is Huitzilopochtli's alternate here. This guy is sometimes Huitzilopochtli, sometimes Huitzilopochtli is him. Sometimes they're two separate people and exist simultaneously.
The next one is my favorite, Tlaloc, which is the god of rain, the one who keeps flooding the world.
Yeah,
Followed,
batting cleanup there. They got the you got the big rain man himself.
which the rain god is one of the most revered in all of the pantheon. We think a lot of times that, that might be equivalent to like Zeus. Well, Tlaloc is effectively that, whereas Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent and god of the morning and evening star, is usually what would be more akin to what we would think of as a Zeus. However, beliefs are different,
Yeah,
different gods, but
yeah, I think
Quetzalcoatl, he is the
yeah
feathered serpent, and you see that imagery
everywhere.
everywhere.
Yeah, and that is because in the sort of Aztec mythos, the most active god is not the most, shall we say, cosmologically important one. This is kind of like how in Nordic mythology, Odin is king of the gods, but Thor is running around doing everything. So, it's a little bit like that is kind of the dynamic here. But yeah, Tlaloc, fun fact, is kind of unique because he and Quetzalcoatl are one of the few gods that actively give life to people. Everyone else is obsessed with taking it away.
So you just got those two running around trying to help everyone out.
Yeah, trying to help everyone out. And everyone else on this lineup may not be entirely antagonistic to humanity, but they certainly don't have humanity's best interests at heart, in part because of what they are. A literal skeleton, among other things. Still looking at you, Lord of Mictlan.
Some embodiment of death you are.
Yeah. We get up here to in the back half of the lineup here, we get to some of my personal favorites. Our first goddess here, Coatlicue, the goddess of nature, who let's just say she has probably the most terrifying appearance of any deity I have ever encountered. We'll get to talk about that later because there's a whole myth around why she looks that way.
Damn nature, you scary.
Yeah. But yeah, fun fact, the Aztec version of Mother Nature was less focused on the butterflies and bunnies and, giving life and agriculture. That was Talok's job. Their Mother Nature was the deep, dark woods with the big bad wolf.
Oh.
It's a dark and terrible place that everything wants to kill you, full of horrible, horrible ways to die. Do not venture there. Coming up here in our penultimate god here is Zolotl, the dog god of twilight and death. He is Quetzalcoatl's twin and polar opposite. He's a fun little fella, and yeah, fun fact: Aztecs are one of the are a bit of an interesting culture in that they viewed snakes as a form of purity and dogs as a form of impurity, which is why Quetzalcoatl and Zoatl are snakes and dogs, respectively.
Interesting.
Yeah. And finally, we come to the form of the destroyer herself, Koyo Za Kui, goddess of the moon. This girl is the only daughter in like a family of 400 some odd people. And oh dear God, does she have an ego?
Yikes.
But we'll get to that because there's a whole myth around why she has an ego. Fun fact, it's the one that explains why Mother Earth looks so freaky. It's not a fun myth.
Oh no.
We
Oh,
should be
no.
afraid. We should be very afraid. That's gonna now that we've met the players. Oops, do that. Now that we've met the players, let's look at some of the things that folk did to interact with these gods. Right? So we've got our pantheon, we've got our cosmology. It's all populated. It's all set and ready to go. But how do we humans deal with these gods? Well, first there's the calendar. Two-wheeled. We've got the solar year of 365 days and the sacred year of 260 key dates that repeat in the cycles of the heavens. These two calendars run simultaneously. They create the Baktun cycle of 52 years. And you adhere to that calendar religiously, because if you don't, the sun will die and the world shall end.
Just had to throw in that religiously part into it.
Yep.
But the calendar was very important, and if we didn't emphasize it enough, a lot of Mesoamerican cultures were very astronomically aligned and very astronomically tied. So for them to have a very, very accurate calendar, which these calendars are, they accommodate for that, really do follow that verbatim, and it gives a sense of rigidity to this culture and to these groups because they have something that to adhere to, and the festival cycle along with that is next level, and that's what ties in with both a lot of the myths but also a lot of the practices that occur along with I'm sure we're probably not going to talk about it in here, but the Mesoamerican ball game also ties in with a lot of it.
Yeah. There will be an opportunity to mention that. It's not written down, but I will let you know when the opportunity comes to bring that up.
Okay.
There is a chance, yeah. And just speaking on the calendar here for a minute, this is something that's very much overlooked, but the Mesoamerican cultures, the Mayans, the Aztecs, and all these other people around them, they were extremely good at mathematics. They were probably on par with the Golden Age Arabs and the ancient Chinese. Like, these people understood math, they understood astronomy, they had understood it for hundreds of years before Europe, before Copernicus and Galileo and the rest of that little intellectual revolution. The Mayans and the Aztecs and all these people, the Mesoamericans, had mapped that out to an almost perfect level.
And all of their monuments, all of their major buildings, and even their ziggurats were built in a place that was astronomically aligned. Like, this math went down to precision building. And unfortunately, I know a lot of people hate when I say this, but realistically, this is where a lot of people think aliens came into being, is because, well, how could this prehistoric society have such advanced building and mathematics? Well, in reality, they were just a bunch of math nerds. They nerded it out.
Yeah. Instead of producing only a handful of Emoteps and Pythagorai like the Egyptians and the Greeks, the Mesoamericans made mathematics their identity. They were the original mathletes and math nerds out there. They went ham on this. They had a concept for putting a number for nothing, which a lot of people didn't. Yeah, that's a fun fact. Zero did not exist for the longest time, and then we come to the Americas, and that's one of the first things we bring back is this new way of counting. Because, again, these prehistoric, quote unquote, primitives had better math than all of Europe.
Again, not very hard to see when Europe actively repressed any sort of scientific or mathematic advancement for the better part of 5 centuries.
Yeah, but like that's the point, is that they didn't need a decent writing system or metalworking to get technological advantages on other parts of the world.
I'm going to counter you here, though, because the Aztec had both of those. They had both metalworking.
Their metalworking is terrible. Okay, we're doing the Hopewell next time, and it's I got into the metalworking that they're doing, and I'm just like, Oh my God. It's amazing that human beings know how to do this, but oh my gosh.
Because, um, granted, a lot of the Aztecs' early metalworking was cold welding, which is just beating a piece of metal till it does what you want.
Yeah.
But they do learn actual smelting and they become very proficient at it. One,
Yeah.
that's part of the reason why the Spanish were so inclined to them, is because can you guess what metal they had developed a really good working relationship with?
It's gold.
Yes, and it's part of the reason why the Spanish believed that there was so much gold in the New World was
Yeah.
because they came across the Aztec who had
Yeah.
one of the largest collections of golden items in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's beating and annealing where basically you put like the metal on like a plate over a fire and then you just punch it and let the air cool it.
So they did a lot of that, but then also they had a writing system.
Yeah.
It was
Oh, yeah,
an
they had a
entire
writing system. Yeah.
it was pictographic and it was mainly hieroglyphics, but it was still a written
It was
language.
it's technic yeah, it is technically a writing system. Wait.
Granted, we lost a lot of knowledge of the writing system thanks to the Spanish.
Yeah. But again, this is just this is the myth of the primitive Aztec is probably the least true thing that we're going to talk about.
For
And
okay,
we're talking about a planet where cats fall from the sky and eat you.
for crying out loud, the Aztec had actual plumbing in their city.
No, here's the true here's the true statistic of success. Tenochtitlan was bigger than any city in Europe when it was found by Cortez.
Yes, which was in the 1480s, I
Yeah.
think. Early
Cortez
1500s.
immediately said, "I'll fix that."
Yeah.
And now we are today.
It's
But
it's interesting too because Tenochtitlan was also built on a grid system, which the Europeans coincidentally started using not that long after the return of Spaniards from the New World. It's real crazy.
yeah. Yeah, they hadn't used it in a long, long time since the Romans went away.
Yeah, they saw the gridded system and they're like, "Wow, this is so easy to conquer. We should really bring this back home."
Yeah. But speaking of what the Aztecs are doing, human sacrifice. Hooray, it's the headliner for
Bum,
the
bum,
day.
bum, bum.
Now, this was particularly associated with the god of the sun, Huitzilopochtli or Tonatiuh, if you want to be technical about it, depending on again which version of the myth and cosmology you are following. It doesn't matter what you call the sun, just as long as you kill someone in his name. Blessed be. And honestly, the biggest part of this ritual was the removal and presentation of the heart. You had to get it out of the person's chest while it was still beating and show that to the sun god. The sun had to see in your hand the beating heart of another human being in order to accept the sacrifice and be fueled by the power of the ritual.
Yeah, and this is the part that really mortified the Spaniards when they saw it. Because not only was human sacrifice taboo, but to see the beating heart, and then they would also push the then limp body of the sacrificee down the steps of the pyramid.
Yep. Which I've got to say, if there was ever a presentation for the efficacy of obsidian in surgical equipment, it would be an Aztec human sacrifice because that shit cut in quick and got the job done.
Well, to be fair, we still use obsidian in modern day procedures, mainly in eye surgeries, believe it or not.
Yeah, we use obsidian. Yeah, we use obsidian and diamond head, and we use obsidian when diamond won't do the trick, and diamond cuts almost everything.
Diamond will cut through anything it's hardest, but obsidian is the sharpest.
Yeah, and that, my dear, is the difference between a drill and a scalpel.
Yikes. But yeah, they would perform these sacrifices, and the Spanish, when they saw it, they freaked out, and that's part of where a lot of the hatred for the Aztec came from, was just how brutal these sacrifices were, And this all happened while there were drums playing, there was music, there was chanting. It
Yeah.
was a terrifying ordeal.
Yep. Oh, it is it was a big deal, and a big part of why so much fanfare goes into this is not only is this sustaining the continued existence of the universe, but not doing it actively angers every other god in existence. Because when the sun was first set in the sky, it refused to move unless all the other gods paid blood sacrifice from their own blood to it. So if humanity doesn't pay up, Halok and Zolotl and Quetzalcoatl all have to go and bleed themselves in front of Huitzilopochtli. They don't want to do that. So if you miss a sacrifice and make them do that, guess what's going to happen to you?
I also like to think the one year that someone convinced him not to do the sacrifice, that just everything went to shit. And they're like, nope, next year we're doing it. We have to.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's one of those things where it's just like, not only do you risk the total destruction of the world, but even if the world continues to exist, the gods will punish you. And that punishment could be literally anything, because we don't know which god had to take our place in the blood sacrifices this month. It could have been the god of wind and he sends a storm. It could be the goddess of nature and she sends a plague. You see how this gets out of hand real quick. But yeah, that actually brings us to the next level of ritual interaction, which is the step down from human sacrifice, and that is bloodletting, which consequently was actually kind of a rich person's game. This was a rich person's thing. Now, what you would do if you were an Aztec noble is you needed to show off your piety, your connection to the gods, your right to be a noble. So, what you would do is you would cut a hole in your tongue. Take a thorny vine, there's plenty around in the jungle, and thread it through your tongue like you're flossing to make your tongue bleed and offer the blood of your tongue to the gods. Some also did it through was it the under their lip or through their cheek. You just cut a hole in your body and started flossing it.
Oh,
And
yikes.
this was a great way to help sustain the gods between sacrifices, make sure that they know that you care about them, and generally keep them from screwing over your entire civilization. Because once again, if we do not do you know these acts of murder and self-mutilation, everyone and everything will die
The,
horribly.
the gods will be angry with me.
Yeah, yeah. What is on the line is the agonizing death of every living soul on Earth. And they were very serious about that, which is actually going to bring us to our myth section. This is where we get to see sort of we've seen the who and the what that is going on. Now we get to see the why. This is the stories of why humanity, specifically the Aztecs, felt that they had to keep doing this. Why does this need to keep happening? What's the story? And it begins with our main man here, Quetzalcoatl, the serpent god. See, turns out this current version of the world had no humans in it. There was no one to live in the world. This made Quetzalcoatl sad. Quetzalcoatl was also at this time riding the high of having been the only god to have predicted that the previous world was going to implode on itself.
I told you guys. I predicted it.
when
I
yeah,
saw it happen.
when the gods built the world before the current one, Quetzalcoatl was the only one who looked at that and said, "This will never work. I want nothing to do with this." So he's riding high on an "I told you so" and has no friends right now. So how's he going to get what he wants? You know, they're booing him, but he's right. Well, he's going to go down to Mictlan, to the house of the skeleton god of death, Mictlan Tecuhtli. I can never say his name. There's too many syllables. And well, down there, in the Mayan version of this story, the people who go down and to retrieve, say, the lost souls and bones of humanity, they go down and they hold a sporting event with the god of the underworld, where they play the great ball game. And if they win, humanity and the bones get to come back up to the earth and become reborn, and humanity gets to live in the new world. If they lose, they become servants of the god of the underworld. In the Aztec version of the myth, Quetzalcoatl just straight up robs this man. He just steals the bones of the skeleton god and books it out of the underworld.
You missed my favorite part about that whole ordeal and that whole celebration that they do, is one of the rewards for playing the game and winning is being a sacrifice. If you win the game, you become a sacrifice. However, for them, that is one of the greatest honors that you could bestow.
Yeah. And in the Mayan version, with the Mayan version of the myth, it is 100% trolling somebody, because in the Mayan version, like, we beat the god of the underworld at the ball game. So now we send our best ball game players to his house to just constantly remind him of what we did. In the Aztec version, that's too complicated. That's too sporting. We're just going to straight up rob this man at Snake Point.
At Snake Point, of course.
Quetzalcoatl is a snake.
Yes, but to say you're robbing someone at Snake Point.
Yeah.
You're not wrong, but it's just not.
Yeah. It's not okay. Speaking of Quetzalcoatl, he gets to star in all the good myths. The second story that we have is sort of why the gods aren't really physically present in the world, and that is because of what happens to Quetzalcoatl. See, in the age of the Toltecs, Quetzalcoatl used to personally rule the city of Tula. Until one day, a minor god called Texcatlipoca, the god of the Great Bear constellation, invaded Tula and ousted him, and forced him and the other gods to flee from, to run, to go into hiding, all these wonderful things. Quetzalcoatl specifically flees into the Atlantic Ocean, whereupon one of two things happens. In one version of the myth, he dives into the sea and emerges as the planet Venus with a new Super Saiyan form, ascends into the sky to challenge the Great Bear constellation. The two of them are up in the sky dancing around each other. In the much more commonly told version, at least today, he summons a winged canoe and sails off into the east, where he goes to embody himself as sort of the god of the dawn, with, the obvious promise of an eventual return. Wonder Wonder if the Aztecs ever accidentally interpreted his return. Because, the hell does a winged canoe look like but a four-masted galleon sailing in?
Oh, the fucking Spanish. It's always the Spanish.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, fun fact. The Spanish do impersonate Quetzalcoatl. When they first get there, yeah, they're able to eventually figure out what the native people are saying. Like, they think we're this god. Cool, we're this god.
They had developed enough of a sense with colonialism that they understood, if given the position of power, to take advantage of it when they could.
Yep. Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah, it is it gets pretty hilarious. Now, our next myth is about Coatlicue. Now, Coatlicue is an insatiable monster that consumes everything that lives, truly befitting the loving, caring image of Mother Nature. Um, this is because to the Aztecs, taking life is more important than giving it. How you died is everything. What you died for is everything. So, Mother Nature being an absolute killer makes sense for them. Not to mention, everything in the world is trying to kill them. The plants are trying to kill them. The cats, the birds, the snakes, the damn water is trying to kill them.
I mean, have you ever been in the jungle of Mexico?
Yeah, no. The world wants you dead. And that sentiment is very strongly shared by Coatlicue's family. And it turns out that the entire reason this world might end is because Coatlicue is a terrible mother and her children are uniquely horrible people. Because Coatlicue's children are constantly fighting their half siblings. And what's interesting about this is the half sibling thing. It's not defined by fatherhood, but it's defined by order of birth. Depending on which birth wave you are in, determines who's on your side and who's your mortal enemy. To open with, we have all the minor gods. Coatlicue gives birth to 400 sons and one daughter. Things are kind of okay at this point. Her daughter has some main character syndrome, but it's not a problem yet because she's the only girl in the universe. All the boys are her siblings. Things are, there's a status quo that can be maintained here until the twins are born. See, Coatlicue gives birth to the twins of Quetzalcoatl and Xolotl to be, the beginning and the end, the dawn and the twilight. This causes the first children of Coatlicue to go into a rage, and for betraying them by having more children, they decide to cut her head off. Except Coatlicue is a god. And if you think for 1 second cutting the head off of a nature god is in any way going to slow them down, you are sorely mistaken. As from the bloody stump, like the Lernaean Hydra, spawns a pair of heads that are massive serpents, which whenever she wants to speak with you, the two heads turn and they meld to each other in sort of a profile so that their two mouths form her one mouth. And one of their eyes becomes each of hers. and she can see in front of her and behind her. And she can never be snuck up on and ever be decapitated again because she's got two heads and can
I
see in
mean,
all
fair.
directions.
Very fair. I don't blame her.
No, and this is absolutely a third thing that happens when she's cut off is apparently she goes into labor and gives birth to the third wave of children, Hutzli, god of war and the sun. She's so angry, she births a flaming ball of absolute violence.
Jeez.
Hutzli takes 1 second to look around and decapitates Kalotniku's only daughter and all of the 100 firstborn sons. So now, they're all just there, decapitated. But, if cutting mom's head off doesn't work, then it certainly doesn't work for all the kids. And the severed heads begin pursuing Hutzli around the world. So he takes to the sky and becomes the sun. And the 400 brothers pursue him and become the stars. Well, meanwhile, what was her name? Did I not write it down over here? Darn. Yeah. Koyozakui, she, the only daughter, ascends to the heavens and becomes the moon. And thus, the moon and the stars are constantly chasing the sun through the sky in an endless cycle around the earth trying to kill him. Fully intent on, once he's dead, turning around and devouring their mother, the literal earth. And, seeing as how humanity lives on earth, humanity is desperate to prevent this from happening. But the good news is, like any marathon runner, you can reach out and give him a little plastic cup of water to boost, boost his strength and keep him going.
Oh my god.
Except the water has to be human blood.
Just a little bit, just to keep him going. Just a
Yeah,
little.
bit.
So the god's a vampire. Got it.
He's running by in the sky overhead. You rip out a man's heart. You hold it up. He reaches down. He grabs it, takes a swig from the heart, tosses it aside, keeps going.
Oh my god.
Run, Hutzli, run.
And I just kept running and running and running.
I just kept running. Who knew people could be so angry? I'll admit, I didn't mean to make him mad, but I sure as hell don't regret it.
I mean, to be fair, that's what happens when you behead 401 people.
Yep.
It's kind of just desserts.
Yeah, which seems a little excessive for the retaliation of a single execution. Which, mind you, one, didn't even work, and two, probably wasn't justified to begin with.
Oh. And then one of my favorite mythological thoughts and facts is what happens to the souls of the Aztec warriors that get reincarnated as hummingbirds. A fierce warrior returns as something as fearsome as a hummingbird.
Yep. Which means that hummingbirds are, in theory, the most sociopathically violent animals in all of nature, according to Aztec mythos.
I mean, it basically is that counterpoint of, like, you were so aggressive at one point, you might as well change it up.
Yeah, well, I think what it is it's the Aztec. There's a lovely little thing. The Aztecs actually loved poetry. They had a little bit of that what you see with Japanese samurai, where, like, you are expected to be a fearsome, terrible, absolute unit when it comes to battle, but you're also expected to be poetic and philosophize and things like that. I mean, I want to say Montezuma's name means something like flower, like the flowery tongued one.
And then
So
we
like,
have rides like Montezuma's Revenge.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's literally Revenge of the Poets.
Oh no! Oh, to be fair, that would be equally as terrifying, I think. To
Yeah, we're
be
gonna.
or not to be.
What it is it's Vogon slam poetry.
Oh. Yikes.
Yeah, yeah. That's always a fun little thing because in this whole cycle, the Aztec warriors, they die or are killed. They go up to the sun, who reincarnates them as hummingbirds and sends them back down to Earth. You just gotta love, like, that is one hell of a commute.
And I just kept running and running and running till I
Yeah.
couldn't run no more.
Yeah.
But cool. I actually think that's a great bookend to wrap up today's episode. A nice positive ending to such an interesting topic. You know, it's something that's interesting because a lot of people may be familiar with the Aztec name and maybe even Tenochtitlan as a city and like as a monument, but you don't often get the chance to really deep dive into the mythology behind it. And this was a really cool one because a lot of these stories, a lot of these gods and other deities that are represented here are heavily, heavily referenced and alluded to in their monuments, in their cities. I mean, the entire whole monument valley that is part of Tenochtitlan, the giant pyramids and everything, are dedicated to these gods and to this process. So it's kind of a cool little tie-in.
Oh, and a small correction here. Apparently, Montezuma. It's not the poet. It's the one who frowns. Montezuma is the one who frowns. I have some very bad translation of Aztec names here going. It's great, but see y'all next time, guys.
Yep. Have a good one, and we'll see you in the next video.